Hello, I'm William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and this evening I was chatting with a parent who was asking about how writing is taught in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy because it doesn't appear that we offer the kind of writing instruction that is available in modern schools. It doesn't appear that our students do the kind of writing that modern school writing courses require students to do. So, what's up with that? How does the Classical Liberal Arts Academy teach students to write? Well, first of all, I'm very proud to say that we don't teach writing the way that modern schools teach writing. And I'm proud to say that because modern schools stink at teaching kids how to write. Anyone who's been to a modern school knows very well that um, he or she was not taught to write well in a modern school program. So we don't do what modern schools do. We don't try to do what modern schools do. We don't want to do what modern schools do in terms of writing. We, I think, address the needs that students have, which allows them, if they choose to do so, go on to become effective writers. So let's talk about this topic of writing a little bit. One of the things I heard one time is that we don't teach APA format. We don't spend a lot of time talking about how to make references and things like that. You get these random criticisms. We teach the classical Catholic curriculum. I mean, if you have kids that are studying the 7 classical liberal arts, classical philosophy, um, Catholic theology, on and on, do you really think that our students are the kinds of kids who are going to have a hard time figuring out how to format references when they write an essay on a college paper? You really think APA format is that complicated? Watch how hard APA format is. I go on my computer, and let's just go to the amazing google.com, and let's take a look. I'll share this with you. Let's go on google.com, and I'll type in APA format generator. And I can go on to this website, and I can enter in a reference, and this website will generate an APA citation for me. That's how complicated this nonsense is with teaching kids how to do APA format. This isn't 1980. People who are still struggling to figure out how to do things that they were supposed to do when they were in school in the 1980s, they need to realize that it's not how things work anymore. Figuring out how to get the APA formatting right on your typewriter is not a concern for modern students. And even if we don't want to use an online generator for preparing a reference, I mean, how long do you think it takes an intelligent person with a classical Catholic education to figure out how to format a reference in a footnote on a paper? So these kinds of concerns are they're really silly. There's no student who gets a classical Catholic education who's going to struggle to figure out something like how to format the references on his paper. So things like that are silly. But to get further into writing, in the Academy we offer an English composition course. And the reason why I chose the textbook that I did for this course, it's called Composition Rhetoric. The author's last name is Brooks. The first chapter has an explanation of why modern writing courses stink. And it explains that students are asked to write papers before they've acquired any of the knowledge or experience or wisdom necessary to write effectively, and they're asked to write about topics that they're not interested in and really don't know anything about. And lo and behold, when you ask students to write about topics that they're not interested in, they don't write well. It's not a mystery. Not only do they not produce good writing, they're not interested in writing. They can't wait for their writing class to end. How many college students at the end of their expository writing courses, their freshman writing courses, how many of them are upset that their writing class is over? None. Most students hate it, and they're just trying to luck their way through that required course and be done with it forever. Why would we want to do that in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy? Why would we want to teach writing like modern schools do it? They do a terrible job. They make a big deal about insignificant issues, and when all's said and done, they don't produce any writers. They don't produce any quality writers, and one of the reasons is that the teachers themselves are not writers. Public school teachers aren't writers. Private school teachers aren't writers. There's no significance or importance of anything that they're writing. They're employed by schools. They're not running businesses. They're not self-employed. They're not writing ads or appealing to customers. They're employed by schools. There's no consequence in any of their writing, and that's part of the problem with modern writing classes. When I started the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, I had to communicate the mission of our program through articles that were read by thousands of people and led to the enrollment in our program by thousands of families. I consider that effective writing. When men start businesses and they have to put together their own advertisements and write letters requesting grants and things like that, who are the effective writers? They're the ones who accomplish their goals. That's the only possible definition of an effective writer, is one who, when he or she needs to, can write something that accomplishes his goal. And it's going to be something that's written on a topic that matters to the writer. It's going to be written on a topic that the writer has knowledge of, and it's going to have all of the necessary elements that are required for good writing. A third one would be the writer is going to have a specific audience in mind that he intends to move in some way. And if the goals of the writer are accomplished, it's going to be called effective writing. And if he fails to accomplish his goals, we're going to say he was not effective in his writing. Aristotle would go even further and say he may have been effective in his writing, but the other person simply doesn't want to do what the writer desired him to do because the person has free will. So defining what it means to even be a good writer would be a good first step. What do you even mean as a parent for your children to be good writers? Back when I was in school and really through my years teaching in private school, when I was a private school, upper school teacher and usually responsible for SAT prep courses, I even served a little bit as an SAT essay grader. Essay writing, artificial high school essay writing was important because it was part of the SAT. Well, that's not even true anymore. And so we have to go back and ask the question, what are we even talking about when it comes to effective writing? Modern schools don't do it. So we don't have to come into the Classical Liberal Arts Academy and say, well, I see that you're teaching the kids the classical liberal arts and classical philosophy and scholastic theology, and you're teaching all these subjects, but what about writing? Why don't we see the kind of activities that we find in modern school writing classes? And the answer is, we have no interest in teaching writing in that way because, as you know, it doesn't work. So don't come to the Classical Liberal Arts Academy looking for failing writing classes like those in modern schools. We're not interested in that. What do we do to teach the kids how to write? We don't simply ignore it, but we actually address the causes of the problems. What are the causes of the problems that students have with writing? It's not a mystery. If you have to write something, what's the cause of your trouble? You don't know what to say. You don't know much about the topic. You don't have an answer to the question. You're not interested in the subject. You really don't know who the audience is or what would make the audience move towards your position. All of these concerns, all of these causes of trouble in writing aren't addressed by having kids write essays. They're addressed by studying the classical liberal arts, classical philosophy, and scholastic theology. That's how they're addressed. Figuring out what to write is going to be based on a knowledge of the topic. It's going to be based on the art of rhetoric. It's going to be based on the art of reasoning. Improving one's writing so that it's clear and exact is going to depend on a knowledge of classical grammar. Being able to come up with a defensible answer to a controversial question is going to be dependent on a sound knowledge of classical philosophy and Catholic theology. And if students had this education, if students were taught the classical liberal arts and taught classical philosophy and taught Catholic theology, they would have a much easier time sitting down to write something. It wouldn't take very much effort. Besides, as our grammar lessons and reasoning lessons teach us, writing is simply setting down in print what would be spoken. So if we're learning to think clearly, we'll learn to speak clearly. And if we learn to speak clearly, we'll be able to write clearly. There's no mystery. There's nothing magical about writing. Writing is simply setting down spoken messages on paper, or whether it's by typing or writing by hand. There's no mystery. It's just speech, and speech is simply the expression of thought. If children's minds are disordered, if they lack knowledge, if they lack wisdom, they're not going to think important, influential thoughts. They're not going to be able to articulate anything intelligent or influential. And therefore, what can they possibly write? What can they possibly put on paper? They simply don't have the education. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the skills. They don't have the interest to write anything significant. So in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, we don't have them write and then do all of this goofy artificial essay correcting and revisions and all this kind of stuff. We don't have teachers poring over the essay assignments of ignorant students who've never even studied grammar or reasoning or rhetoric, never even studied history, have never even learned scholastic philosophy or any of these subjects as if they're going to write some masterpiece. We don't do that. We teach them those subjects instead. So you're not going to find modern writing classes and techniques in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. But what you're going to find, if you look, is the actual solution to the problems in modern writing courses. You're going to see us teaching the classical liberal arts. You're going to see us guiding students to know important philosophical sciences like classical ethics. Don't you think that would be important before a student starts answering controversial political or moral questions? Don't you think they should study ethics first? If it's a Catholic student, before they start writing articles or essays that express their faith, don't you think they should demonstrate that they have learned their faith? So we're not interested in the writing approach to writing. We're interested in developing a strong program of intellectual formation that actually gives the students the knowledge and the skills that they need to write within their own life's interests in whatever path they choose in the future. So no, you're not going to find modern writing activities in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, nor should you seek them. So I hope that clarifies things. We're not trying to be a modern school. We're not trying to do what modern schools do. It's the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. We teach the classical liberal arts. And if students would learn the classical liberal arts rather than all of the fluff of the modern school curriculum, we wouldn't have all of this chaos when it's time for a kid to sit down and write something. So I hope that's helpful. God bless.